The purpose of story structure is to keep your reader focused and engaged on the story that you're telling them and not drifting off into another world. There are three elements to doing that. The first is pattern disruption, then there's pattern, and then mimetic imitation. Pattern disruption is really about dealing with the fact that humans psychologically are habituating beings. And what that means is that our brains function so that when we repeat the same kinds of events over and over again, we turn off our conscious brain because we don't need to use them. So when you drive home from work the same path every day, you don't remember most of your trip home because you didn't need your conscious brain. You didn't need to take up memory space doing the same thing that you did the day before and the day before that. But that's a bad thing in writing a story because people tune out if they aren't constantly disrupted and they become bored and they move on, they put the book down and they never come back to it. And so you are constantly disrupting the pattern through things like rising action, probably the most important pattern disruption within storytelling. What you're doing is you're constantly increasing the stakes and the intensity of the conflict through the story. Ironically, patterns are also important, the opposite, because if there's no pattern and pattern recognition, your reader becomes confused and disoriented and they can't ground themselves in things that they can recognize. That's why people like particular kinds of genres, because they know the rules of that genre. You establish a contract with your reader every time you start a book in which you establish the genre, the story type it is, the rules of the world, the character types, and so on, and then you have to stick to it, because if you break that contract with your reader, they'll become angry and they'll throw you out. The third element is actually related to patterns, and that is mimetic imitation, and really means that your story structure replicates in symbolic form the experience that people have of life in the modern world. And so they recognize themselves in the pattern of development of your character. The three-act structure is the classic and most widely known version of this, because the way that we experience life in the modern era is linear and progressive. We have a sense that we start in the ordinary world, we experience something new that forces us to change our way of being, we learn, we develop skills, we become apprentices in this new way of being. We mess up, we learn through a crisis, and then we resolve it through mastering that skill. That's different from the pre-modern world where you had things like cyclical storytelling because the experience of life represented the cycle of the seasons and so on.